Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for inviting me to open this series of debates on the challenges we face as a society. What I'm going to do tonight is to set out a path, one of the key ideas that we're pursuing, but I know that that will beg many questions about how this impacts on the voluntary sector, and I'm very happy to have quite a discussion about that as we go through the question and answer session. Always a little daunting to be the first to take on a new initiative, but hopefully I can do justice to the powerful ideas, concept, and set a foundation stone for the lecture series to come. And what I want you to do tonight is to walk you through what I believe is a revolution, tucked away amongst a range of measures designed to change the culture of government and its relationship with its contractors. One part, a key part of getting government to do less and trusting those who can do the job better. Whitehall is famous, as you'll know, for its one-size-fits-all approach. The man from the ministry always seems to know best. But the truth is, today, it's a statist approach to government which I think is increasingly outmoded and ineffective. In part, discredited by some of the policy approaches of the past decade, which I think often took government to a point where it was out of touch with what was really going on in the country and its traditions and some of the practicalities of doing work on the ground. But also, I think, a result of a slow slide towards a world where all too often people are afraid to take responsibility, to make a decision for fear of not following the prescribed process to the letter, or worse, getting sued if they do. And one of the phrases that always drives me to distraction is, someone should do something about it, because actually it's us that has to do something about it. Too many people in all walks of life are now hidebound by reams of rules and regulations that are hard to understand and yet impossible to ignore. And I think this fear factor stifles creativity and starves the country of the innovation that made Britain the country that is what it is and what it has been across its history. And I think in particular, there is a huge amount of creativity in our voluntary sector that remains untapped and could do so much more. We're trying to change all of that. The Coalition is committed to a new form of government that treats people as adults, that is determined to leave behind the diktat of policy making in Whitehall, and instead let the people of this country do what they're good at, getting out there and getting on with it. Unleashing the creativity and energy of local groups, removing some of the factors that cause people to say, I'm not sure I should do that, I might get into trouble if I do. Allowing local communities who really understand the challenges they face to determine how they manage their own affairs in their own way. It's a sense of local responsibility that's always been in the DNA of the party I'm part of, so it's no great surprise that we are pursuing this path in government. It's also been part of the DNA of our coalition partners, and the desire to devolve, decentralise, push responsibility to the front line is something that has helped unify the coalition government. But turning this instinct for decentralisation and turning it into practical costed policies did not happen overnight. In my own area of welfare and employment, the reforms we are introducing represent a radical departure from the policies of the past. And while it seems very popular these days to talk about political journeys, we have certainly taken a lengthy journey in this country in terms of our approach to decentralising the welfare system. A number of milestones I could point to, but the so-called boom years of the past decade, the times when the previous government was talking about the economic miracle, I think is as good a place to start as any. The country was in the midst of a long run of economic growth. We had apparently abolished boom and bust, but even when the times were good, when the number of jobs in this country were increasing rapidly, millions of new jobs being created, millions of extra people in employment, we still had up to 5 million people on out-of-work benefits, consistently through good years and bad. Not only that, but as we know now with the benefit of hindsight, many of those jobs that were created were picked up by people coming into the UK from overseas. We failed to get people from this country off benefits and into work. And instead of supporting people in hard times, as the welfare system was originally designed to, a rigid state superstructure ended up trapping those nearly 5 million people on benefits. and in many communities it became a way of life. Welfare dependency was rife in streets and neighbourhoods up and down the country, where some people had lost any sense of an aspiration to a better life for themselves and their families. Worse, for many people, a faceless bureaucracy actually had the effect of eroding any sense of personal responsibility. We created a system that helped condemn people to a lifetime on benefits through an unaffordable benefits regime which actually was structured in a way that discouraged people from seeking work, which, as we know, is one of the surest ways out of poverty, out of deprivation, and into mainstream society. A whole host of statistics illustrate the scale of that failure. But actually, to me, the one that always stands out is the fact that we ended up with almost 2 million children growing up in workless households, one of the worst rates across the whole of Europe, and a hugely damaging legacy for the next generation. So that was the starting point for some new thinking. Not just about how we might tear down the barriers to work and rebuild the benefit system, but more fundamentally about how we could reinforce the importance of work as a bulwark that supports more meaningful lives, stronger families, and more cohesive communities. Now, I got involved in that work 3 years ago when we launched a green paper in opposition setting out our plans for change. David Cameron set out the core principles of what we wanted to see in the introduction when he said, Labour's bureaucratic approach, and forgive the party politics, I'm quoting directly, has failed. We need a thorough overhaul of the way that benefits are administered. Our plans for welfare reform will help those who want to work into sustainable employment and cut benefits for those who refuse to work. They will give some of our most deprived citizens the opportunity to live independent and fulfilling lives. Above all, they will help more people contribute to the responsible society I want to achieve. Now, although I throw in a party political point there, actually what's been really exciting about the last few years is the way that actually that argument has spread across the political spectrum to a point there is genuine political unity now on the need to do this. The responsibility agenda forged the basis of the welfare reforms we're now implementing. But the fact that the ideas were picked up, ideas that originated in North America, or ideas that were picked up here, have been seen through into government, the fact that we're now able to put in place reforms that are based on some of the detail put in place in the latter days of the previous government is a sign of the degree to which there's been a coalescence of view about the need for change. Hardly a surprise, David Freud, Lord Freud as he now is, the Minister for Welfare Reform under this government, originally worked on a commission report for Tony Blair, then helped us put together our green paper, then worked with the previous government in their latter days to try and turn some of those ideas into a reality, and has now joined this government as a minister, setting out some of the challenges in the welfare arena, helping us shape some of the solutions that we're putting together today. But he was far from being alone in recognising that there was a deep-seated problem. Many of those in opposition today came to realise across the course of the last Parliament that the system was broken long before we actually stepped up to do something about it. So it's been a really good example over the last few years, probably the last 4 or 5 years, of the way that actually the political world has come together behind a set of ideas. And that, I think, makes the changes that we're putting in place genuinely powerful for the future, because they will, and I believe can and should, survive any future changes of government. And I think that the fact that most people recognise that it cannot be right to have a system that defines people as stranded on benefits indefinitely, that leaves people in this position, means that there's also a huge public groundswell of demand for change that goes beyond the tabloid headlines, but gives us a hugely important platform on which to work. An example of the consensus is the way in which we now have strong cross-party, cross-political support for the plans to try and move people off incapacity benefit, to challenge those people about the options available to them, to try and demonstrate to them there is potentially, for those who have got the ability to do so, there are better options available. Not to remove support from those who absolutely need it, but to actually provide opportunities and support for those who've got the potential to do something better. And that's why, from this spring, we will be reassessing 1.6 million people on incapacity benefit to help identify those who've got the potential to do something better with their lives and give them the support they need to do so. a challenging process, the one that will be difficult to go through, but at the same time, because there is now cross-party and cross-society support for that change, I think it will be much easier to deliver. The same non-partisan approach has been very supportive. The same non-partisan support has also been immensely valuable in delivering Ian Duncan Smith's great vision of the universal credit, a transformation of our benefit system that will, for once and for the first time in a long time, genuinely ensure that work pays. A single system, structured in a way that people who decide to work a few extra hours each week or to go back and earn a bit more money will always know they'll be better off. And the refrain that many of us have so often heard, "I'd be better off on benefits," will no longer be the case.